This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Check out the link in the description to see how you can learn new skills in a relaxed setting right at home. Hey everyone, Gaijin Goombah here, and welcome to
Everything you know about Pokemon Legends is wrong.
Lil G, we talked about this. We don't know if they're wrong, we just have a different theory that—
Oh no, they're freaking wrong. We got receipts, we got tea, we got everything to show just how wrong these clickbait Poketubers really are with Legends.
Okay, one, I think you're mixing up the slang here, and two, we've only had a few minutes worth of a trailer for a game not even in alpha yet. There's still a lot of interpretation that could be taken with—
These are not ninja. I can't even roll the intro. This is a witch ninja now. They're not ninjas! Alright, you want the most basic of cultural litmus tests? Tell me, based on these two images, which do these Pokemon ninja kids look more like? Yeah, a Serpa from Golden Kamui. You know, that anime that takes place in Hokkaido, that heavily revolves around the indigenous Ainu people? Cause that's what's culturally influencing Legends, not feudal Japan, but the Ainu and Japan's relationship with them. Besides, if you want to equate Legends, if not the entire Pokemon franchise itself, as a mirror of Japan, its geography, its history, and its culture, then how in the world are these kids ninja? Okay, sure, you got Kogo over here from Gen 1, but he's one crazy dude, not an entire government organization. In fact, ninja haven't had any sort of central organization in 200 years with—
Alright, cool your jets, mister. We have standards around here, so let's take this one educated step at a time. Sorry folks, I know he's being a little overly aggressive, but he's absolutely right. I don't think for a moment that these two kids we have here as main characters in Legends are ninja at all. Because like Lil G said, if you want to look at this game and Sinnoh as a mirror to Hokkaido, they couldn't be. It doesn't fit the dress or the timeline. So let's start off with the outfits, because I know this has been a huge point of contention for a lot of people. I know on which ninja we keep saying
Real ninja wear blue.
But you also have to remember why we say that. Not because the Shinobi Shozoku is a uniform, because it absolutely isn't, but because when it was worn only worn when it made for the best camouflage. Nighttime, not in the middle of the day surrounded by greenery. Also, the clothing is contrasting in color too. The sleeves, I guess you could call it a tomoeri, and around the base of the coat all look extremely puffy and white, completely inconsistent with the Shozoku, which is one solitary color. Not to mention, neither character is wearing a proper zukin for that matter. And no, the scarf doesn't count. No, this isn't ninja clothing. This is obviously more standard winter clothing, made really obvious by the Fukagutsu over here. Tight weave sort of straw boots to keep snow out and keep the feet insulated. But clothing aside, again, if we're making time period parallels between Sinnoh and Hokkaido, historically speaking, the likelihood of ninja being out here are slim to nil. Look, the final breath of Shinobi having any sort of organization or use by the centralized government was all the way back in the early 1600s when Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate and the Edo period. At this time, he hired remnants of both Iga and Koka ninja into the Hyakunin Gumi, Onmitsu, and a few other centralized secretive organizations, an elite guard that acted as special agent protectorates and intel gatherers for the shogun's family. But even this group was eventually dissolved. In 1862, 7 years prior to Hokkaido's incorporation into the Japanese state, right as the Boshin War was about to really brew, and right around the time we think this game takes place in Sinnoh, the Shogun, either due to lack of funds or the fact that his power was falling apart, decommissioned the Hyakunin Gumi and theoretically all of its other Onmitsu. In fact, the last act of the Hyakunin Gumi was working with the now ex-shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu to find him a place to retire in Shizuoka while he passed power down to the imperial court.
There. Do you need any more evidence to prove that these kids aren't ninja? I'm freaking sorry, but I just don't feel like anyone is getting this stuff right, and no one is looking into the cultural historical stuff close enough. Well, except for one guy, right?
Oh, absolutely. So you may have noticed on your Twitter timeline a guy named Kaihatsu who's been putting us to absolute shame breaking down all of the insane little details of Legends and its Hokkaido and Ainu based origins. Well, I got in contact with the guy and learned an exceptional amount of info from him that got me looking at everything we could from the Legends trailer, not only from a Japanese perspective, but from an Ainu perspective. And with Kaihatsu's help, we want to not only echo his findings, but also our own takes on what we know. But I will say this, we're only covering a small amount of what Kaihatsu's working on. In fact, he's got an entire series in the works called Pokemon that's gonna make this video look like a footnote, so be sure to keep an eye out for more info on that series.
Alright, so let's start at the beginning. With a gas-powered lantern, a couple of wooden Pokeballs, a Suzuri inkstone with brushes, and a curious book that opens a tale from long, long ago, when the Sinnoh region was still only a vast wilderness. And And stop. Yeah, the real connections are this early in the trailer.
So you see these little sumie-styled right-to-left books here? These are, in their entirety, inspired by the works of early Japanese explorers who wrote and painted dozens of informational books when they were first exploring and gaining information about the Hokkaido region. Seriously, look at how Legend paints out not just the different Pokemon of the region, but also the exact one-to-one landscape of the region. We know for an absolute fact that the point of this game is to observe and document Pokemon in the region, creating, in theory, the very first Pokedex. Well, that's exactly what Waijin explorers did in the early to mid-1800s, exploring everything they could of Hokkaido and taking detailed notes and even more detailed ink painting pictures, with or without color, chronicling landscapes, plants, and animals.
Granted though, all this information was gathered so that Japan could eventually annex the territory in the late 1860s and take advantage of its natural resources. But this is Pokemon, so I think Game Freak's just gonna skirt by that little historical note.
But there is absolutely no greater connection here when it comes to Pokemon Legends and the history of IRL Sinnoh, Hokkaido. What you're doing in-game is the exact same thing that early Waijin explorers of the region were doing, documenting everything in the exact same style of books, in the same style of art between real life and the trailer of this game. You know, it's kinda interesting. Despite what Japan eventually did with the then called Eza region and its people, the folks who went out and pioneered the North were, in a really interesting way, self-educators, going into the wild unknown, learning everything they could about it. And I'm thinking, that spirit of learning is something that we can share right now, despite all of us being cooped up in our homes. All it takes is the right resources and the drive to dip into the unknown. And that's where our sponsor Skillshare comes into play. For those of you who may not have ever heard of Skillshare, it's a really active community of millions of people who have come together not only to learn new skills and passions, but teach them as well. Things like entrepreneurship, illustration, marketing, mechanical engineering, and yes, even things like Japanese language and cultural arts. And yeah, you know that's what I've been spending my time with Skillshare on. And unlike a lot of traditional education that mars folks down with things like rigorously structured curriculums from a textbook, Skillshare's community provides not only countless topics of learning to choose from, but each set of lessons is created by a person passionately devoted to it, with people finding new and inspired ways to teach about the things that they love, which is definitely an outlook that rings heavy with our goals and our educational content. So if you want to learn a new trade, skill, or you just want to spend your time learning something new, click that link in the description, because the first 1,000 viewers can get a trial of Skillshare's premium service absolutely free. The internet's still a massive frontier of information, so follow the pioneers of old and take your first steps into the wild blue of learning.
Wait, hang on, don't close that book just yet, because we gotta talk about the starter Pokemon in Legends. Look, I'm sorry, but the popular arguments that these three particular Pokemon were chosen because they have Japanese backgrounds is pretty weak. Starting with Oshawott. This Autolad eventually evolves into Samurott, also known as Daikinki, alluding to the word samurai and greatsword energy respectively. And yeah, this guy absolutely has a samurai feel to him, but so what? During the mid-1800s, samurai had vastly lost their power, as the once lowest of low merchant class were actually gaining more and more power over the samurai through trade and the wealth that came with it. Heck, the Boshin War itself, which was starting around this time, was started because samurai were feeling more and more disempowered. So the samurai, at least for this period of time, were anything but relevant. Next, you've got Rowett, which I've seen many people say that because many samurai were Kyudoka, specializing in archery, that it just made sense to have an archery Pokemon be a part of the core 3. And no. Archery hasn't been that huge a part of a samurai's life since Nobunaga steamrolled Japan with the matchlock rifle over 200 years prior to this game. Samurai still held ancient ideas of Kyuba no Michi fairly close since the 1100s, but bows did not have the power they once did at this period of time. Secondly, you're assuming that the Ainu and other indigenous people of the area didn't have an established robust culture of bow and arrow warfare, which they absolutely did. Just look at the Emishi people. Finally, we've got Cyndaquil, and this has got to be the biggest weak sauce argument of the three. Cyndaquil eventually evolves into Typhlosion, whose Japanese name is Bakufu, which people have claimed is a wordplay on Bakufu, or the old shogunate system. Buddy, the Tokugawa shogunate had been radiating power since Matthew Perry kicked Japan's door down in 1853, theoretically when Legends takes place. Just a scant 10 years later, the entire Bakufu bellied up to the Meiji Restoration after the Boshin War. Similar to the samurai, the Bakufu was anything but relevant in this period of time. Now, if you want to argue that because these three topics that link the starters together were weakened into face, I mean, okay, but that feels like a really huge stretch.
Well, I mean, it's somewhat possible. These are all theories after all. But based on the research that I've done and the research that Kaihatsu has been sharing with me, there are far greater connections between these three starters and the Ainu people of Hokkaido versus the traditional old Japan that was fracturing at the seams at this time. Starting again with Oshawott, and oh man, you want to talk about a civilization that features a ton of otters? Well, look no further than the Ainu. First of all, there's an Ainu epic called the Kutune Shirka, a first-person story of Protag-kun, no, we actually don't know his name, who hears the news of a golden sea otter and a bounty that was placed on it. And whoever catches said golden sea otter gets the issuer's sister as a bride and a huge sum of treasure as a dowry. Apparently the man of Ishkar, as he was called, was a supremely high roller. Well, safe to say a lot of men try to nab that golden otter, but it was our Protag-kun that snatches the creature, gets the girl, and that fabulous fortune, which in turn creates so much resentment and jealousy with the other men that entire wars break out between tribes. Now, I will admit wholeheartedly that I'm not doing this epic tale justice in the slightest, but I will say this is one of the most well-known tales still known within the Ainu, and considering their entire culture is passed down word of mouth, that's an impressive feat. But not nearly as impressive as the screw-up another otter did in the Ainu creation myth. As the story goes, while mankind was in the process of being made, the great creator deity unexpectedly had to run back to heaven for something important, leaving the creation of mankind incomplete. Before leaving though, they called over to an otter and told it to relay a message to another deity so that the job could be finished. After a lengthy explanation, the creator left. While the otter did say that he'd pass on the message, this otter, being an otter, quickly became more preoccupied with goofing off, swimming, grooming, and eating fish, completely forgetting the details that he was given. Thus, this is the Ainu explanation as to why mankind is so flawed.
Thanks, Oshawott, you literally ruined humanity.
Hey, I wouldn't be too hard on him, because there's also plenty of tales of otters being smart and powerful monsters in disguise. In Urashi Betsu, there are tales of monster otters who would shapeshift into humans, go into the homes of beautiful maidens, and either kill them or kidnap them for wives. So yeah, be careful who you're yelling at. Next, we got Rowlet, and again, owls have big roles when it comes to Ainu culture, particularly when it comes to the great Kamui Chitkap Kamui, the god of owls in the land, a grand overseer of both humanity and Kamui, and the god who makes sure that humans do their required rituals right. As for that story, in the beginning, a great famine hit the Ainu people a long time ago. Chitkap Kamui needed to send a request to heaven to determine what was causing this famine. And considering that the Ainu have no written language, this instruction had to be given orally. At first, Chitkap Kamui called for the crow to be the messenger, but this was a long set of instructions. Yeah, you thought the Ocarina of Time owl liked to gab? By day 3, the crow had fallen asleep listening to Chitkap Kamui's instructions. And out of anger, Chitkap Kamui killed the crow and moved on to the mountain jay. And that had the exact same issue and result. It wasn't until Chitkap Kamui enlisted the Dipper Bird, who listened to all 6 days worth of instruction, that their message finally reached heaven. Apparently, the fish and game gods were angry that the proper rituals for slaying game weren't being exercised by the people. But once folks learned and executed the correct rituals for the game that they caught, the famine finally dissipated.
Yeah, let's also not forget that Chitkap Kamui was also the god of material success, who was so blinged out that his tears were said to be made of gold and silver.
Finally, we have Cyndaquil in all its evolutions, as the volcano Pokemon. Cause yeah, volcanoes are a big deal in Ainu culture. Heck, in a lot of cases, several different Kamui reside in volcanoes, with one of the most well-known examples being Ushishira Island, the highly volcanic hot spring holy island that's said to house Kana Kamui. No, this one, the Draconic Kamui of Lightning. Yeah, I'm excited for Season 2 as well, folks, but let's stay on task. But there's another tale that might have some connection between the volcanic mouse and the Ainu. There's an old story dating back to 1822 where Usu Volcano erupted onto the Abata settlement in Ezo, basically the territory we know Hokkaido to be. March 12th is when the rumbling got started, and by the 19th it was so bad that there was an evacuation order given to flee to the nearby settlement of Benbei. Now, the Ainu people believed that the eruption of this volcano was the work of wicked gods of nature expressing their fury. So, for quite some time, the Ainu begged the benevolent gods to stop it. And sure enough, by the 22nd, a heavy rain came pouring in which cooled the lava and dispersed toxic fumes, proving that the evil gods were weakening. Going back to Cyndaquil and its evolutions, again, it's known as the volcano Pokemon, which, as mentioned previously, is very fitting for Ainu culture. But also the idea that Cyndaquil erupts when angered might also be a convenient callback to the story of Usu. Again, all theories of course. But now let's switch gears for something completely different. Something that I haven't seen a lot of people really talk about. the wooden steam-powered Pokeballs.
Apparently, according to Legends website, the Pokeballs of old were built out of freaking wood, and when Pokemon were caught, there would be a release of steam puffed out the top. Weird, right?
Well, not so weird that it wouldn't have possible cultural connections. One theory that came to mind is that this carefully crafted Pokeball wasn't carved directly from a log of wood, but rather was formed using a special heating process which created Hakata Magemono containers. Basically, the process has the crafter heat boards of cypress or cedar trees into a rounded form where they were then fastened with strips of cherry tree. Now, what made this work so much better than hard-cut boxes is that this style of container would actually soak up excess moisture and kept food like rice at optimal humidity and temperature. Thus, Hakata Magemono made for some great lunchboxes. But theoretically speaking, considering the fact that these wooden Pokeballs emit steam after they catch a Pokemon, would it be possible then that this style of wooden container would also be a super effective capture container for Pokemon? I mean, the only real connections we have here is the wood shape and the steam and moisture manipulation, but who knows? Because now we come to potentially the weirdest possible inspiration for the wooden steam-powered Pokeball, the Utsuro Bune. Quite a ways south of Hokkaido, a UFO supposedly washed ashore on the beaches of Hitachi province in 1803. The Utsuro Bune itself was believed to be a vessel that held a beautiful, possible extraterrestrial female lifeform who eventually returned to the sea in the sphere. But what's curious is that this vessel not only was seemingly a small, rounded, transportable housing for a mythological figure, but it also had a latch at the top similar to the Pokemon Legends Pokeball. Again, not exactly 101, but there's something interesting going on here.
I mean, hey, there are people in the Pokemon world and our own that believe Pokemon came from space, so who's to say this Pokeball-like spacecraft isn't evident of that?
But again, I don't think I'm doing Pokemon Legends due justice with all the speculation. But there's still a while before the game releases and even more details coming in. Details I hope to see in Kaihatsu's future documentary on Sinnoh and the Ainu.
Ah yes, soon trademark.
And speaking of all this educational content, remember, if you've been wanting to learn a new skill to widen your resume, want to start a new hobby, or just learn something for fun, click that link in the description and check out Skillshare's free premium service offer. But from all of us here, thanks for watching. With Monster Hunter Rise coming soon, you better believe we got something extra special planned for the channel. And you can also expect an extra long stream over on my Twitch when it does drop. But before that, I still gotta see what the patrons are curious about for the next video. Maybe something on Little Nightmares 2, maybe something on Resident Evil Village. We'll just have to see. But until next time, everyone, this is Gaijin Goombah, signing out.